Hey everyone, welcome to today's edition of One Single Story. It's April the 25th, day 115.
Like we're getting somewhere.
Yeah, we are. We're close to a third of the way through.
Almost.
Yeah, and I'm thankful we made it this far. Somewhat surprised some days, with the work that it requires, and when you have passages like this that you really got to, figure out what are we going to talk about here today. It creates a little bit more of a challenge. So we're in 1 Chronicles 5. That's part of your reading today. And we're going to look at the whole chapter. So it's kind of another passage of descendants. But there are there's some information given in here that I think is important for us to talk about. So I'm going to read the first couple of verses and then we'll have a conversation of it. It's about it. It says, the oldest son of Israel was Reuben, but since he dishonored his father by sleeping with one of his father's concubines, his birthright was given to the sons of his brother Joseph. For this reason, Reuben is not listed in the genealogical records as the firstborn son. The descendants of Judah became the most powerful tribe and provided a ruler for the nation, but the birthright belonged to Joseph. So he's going to list off who all the descendants were, but it tells us out of the gate, we're going to talk about Reuben for a second. Reuben and Gad and half of the tribe of Manasseh stay on the east side of the Jordan. So that's kind of the people that we're getting here. But it says he dishonored his father by sleeping with one of his father's concubines, and it altered what would be the normal path for a family. Normally he would have been the one in power. Probably it doesn't explicitly say this. It implies that the ruler should have come from his family, and clearly he had the birthright. We're introduced to this whole birthright thing with his father. Jacob and Esau. That concept of whose birthright, who gets the blessing, who don't get the blessing, and his father steals it. Yeah. In this case, so let's talk about the difference between the two. His father steals it and gets the blessing. He gets it. He deserves it based on being born, but he forfeits it based on his actions.
But his father's brother kind of did the same thing.
What his father's brother did? What?
Pretty much gave up his birthright.
Right. Yeah.
His father. All us do.
Yeah. He claimed he was starving to death. I'm going to die. He over exaggerated his situation, and no doubt, Reuben, to sleep with his father's concubine, over exaggerated the situation.
That was a bad idea.
That's so. What causes us to forfeit position, place, power, privilege, blessings, because of some action that we take? What inside of us would be willing to give up what would be a generational right?
I think the easy answer is when we make long-term decisions based on short-term circumstances, meaning we want satisfaction and fulfillment now. We're not willing to delay gratification or things that are off limit to us. We begin to rationalize, when reality is we need to understand that every choice and every decision we make has a generational effect. Whether you realize it or not, you may think it's something super small, but it has an impact on those behind us.
I think making unwise, quick, like Jay said, decisions. And you kind of wonder, too, in this particular situation, what the relationship was between Reuben and his dad. Because, was he undermining him? Was that an easy way for him to undermine his dad? Was it something that was constantly going on? Which you certainly see in families a lot.
Yeah, well, there are a lot of underlying factors there. I suspect he's old enough to know that he didn't necessarily love his mama. At a young age, he's the firstborn. He's the one he's after is Rachel,
Yeah.
and he wants Leah. So maybe he has some resentment there. Clearly, he has some resentment to Joseph. As all of the brothers do. So it's a really complicated thing. I think the average person doesn't think about the long-term effects when they're trying to solve a short-term problem. In his dad's case, Israel, Jacob, or Esau, their uncle, Esau claims to be starving to death.
Mm.
He probably wasn't starving to death, but he probably was very hungry. And that emotion of the moment, I've used the word starving,
Mm-hmm.
but I've never been starving.
Sure.
And the emotion of the moment caused him to make a choice. Reuben apparently was feeling some kind of way when he saw his father's concubine.
He obviously was feeling some kind of way.
Yeah.
But even that though, I think if you go back and look at that passage is that he thought that was a power play. It was
Right.
showing that, okay, I am next in line. I do have control and dominance, and therefore I'm going to do this stupid thing, which backfired on him.
Yeah. And then Joseph, who is the next to youngest, gets two sons that get land rights. They get treated as tribes because there are places, at least in some translations, it talks about the tribe of Joseph, but it's talking about Ephraim and Manasseh.
Mm-hmm.
That his two sons, and then Judah, we get the kings through. The people who rise to power come through Judah, and so we hear very little about Reuben. I think about what it would be like now, how if he hadn't done this, and that our whole terminology would change.
Yeah.
We would be talking about the line of Reuben.
Yeah.
Right? How that would just change things, and one decision can change things for ages and ages and ages. And so it goes on to list, out the sons there, who reigned, who didn't reign, Gad, the Gadites. Then you get down to verse 18, and it says there were 44,760 capable warriors in the armies of Reuben, Gad, and the half tribe of Manasseh. They were all skilled in combat, armed with shields, swords, and bows. They waged war against the Hagrites, the Jederites, the Naphasites, and the Nodabites. They cried out to God during this battle, and he answered their prayer because they trusted him. So the Hagrites and all their allies were defeated. So they're in this battle. There's 44,000 of them plus, and they cry out to God, and he answers their prayer and wins. So the world, on a worldwide scale, at least while we're recording this, I don't know what 3 weeks from now is going to look like. It could change. But at least on a worldwide scale, we are becoming aware again. A new generation is being exposed to physical combat, warfare, on a hand-to-hand basis, nation to nation. That is not always, it's something you can go long periods of time and not see that. It says they prayed and they won. I always find it interesting, particularly after like a boxing match or an MMA match, to hear the guy interviewed and say, I want to thank God for giving me this victory tonight. Well, either the other guy was a horrible person, or you prayed better than he did, or you're just putting God in something that don't need to be in. Do you think God is concerned about the outcome of physical combat?
On an individual scale, like between me and you? or do you mean like between countries, or all the above, any conflict, period?
Yes, I think when it comes to physical combat, is God concerned about who is victorious?
Well, it says there that they trusted in him, and that was why
Yeah, I
he gave
think.
them victory.
Yeah, I think he's most concerned about the heart of an individual or a group of people, which in turn often reflects outcomes in our lives, whether it's physical conflict, financial issues, relational issues, etc. I think it's important to note that Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh were on the east side, which was a place they were never supposed to be to begin with. You know, they made a deal with Moses to stay there because they were attracted by what they saw, but apparently their hearts were still in the right place on this occasion when they cried out, because in this very same chapter before we finish up, they've drifted away from God, and we see just the opposite. He doesn't come to their rescue. You know, they become captives. And so I think it's a reflection of their heart and their humility at the time of the prayer. And I think that comes into play whenever, you know, we're in a conflict, whatever it looks like.
Yeah, I don't know how to completely articulate this, you know, and I certainly don't know if I can articulate it in a spiritual fashion. But watching unfold on a world stage, what we see unfolding on a world stage, I find myself picking sides and wanting somebody to win. You know, going, man, I wish they could blow up that tank. You know, the bad part about that is there are other people inside that tank who are also maybe not even there of their own accord.
Right.
They're not there
they
because
don't have
they
a
want
choice
to. That's
in
right.
the situation.
They're being forced to. And so is my taking a side dangerous? I don't know. It's one of those things that sometimes I ponder.
Yeah, and I don't know that you'll ever resolve that emotional conflict, you know, that tension that was in there, because you can go back to this chapter and just a few verses later when they become captive. Not everybody of those tribes, you know, had worshiped false gods and idols, but they were innocent victims in the process, you know, of the group. And it kind of goes to your scenario. The guy in the tank may be there because he don't have a choice in the matter.
Right. Well, it goes on down where you're talking about, verse 24 and 25. It says, these were the leaders of their clans: Epher, Ishi, Eliel, Azriel, Jeremiah, Hodaviah, and Jadiel. These men had a great reputation as mighty warriors and leaders of their clans. But these tribes were unfaithful to the God of their ancestors. They worshiped the gods of the nations that God had destroyed. So the God of Israel caused King Pul of Assyria, also known as Tiglath-Pileser, to invade the land and take away the people of Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh. So it says in verse 24, they have a great reputation as mighty warriors. But their unfaithfulness in 25 undoes their reputation. How does unfaithfulness undo reputation?
People don't trust you anymore.
At least for a period of time.
Yeah. Which, I mean, I guess that infers they didn't trust God, so he didn't come to their rescue.
Yeah, and so not only did they have a great reputation, but the reputation came because they did have the skill and the ability, and they had demonstrated that, and they had a willingness to engage folks. But obviously, and I'm thinking of Saul, you know, he had a lot of attributes going for him early on until the Lord said, okay, I'm done with you. Yeah. And so no matter how gifted, how skilled we are, how intelligent, intellectual, how much resources we have, if we don't have the favor and the blessings of God upon it, just like here, it's going to come to naught.
Yeah, it's trust is earned in drops and lost in buckets. That's the way I've heard it said. You know, and you can work on something and build a reputation for years
and years,
and in moments,
in a single moment, event.
Yes,
gone.
You can erase it, almost all of it. And I don't think we're always aware of how fragile, if you will, our reputation and trust really is. Mm-hmm. We think, you know, I've got this lifetime of goodness. If I deviate, you may get the benefit of the doubt from a good group of people. That's true. But in general, it's going to take you a long time to earn that trust back. You know, reputations aren't earned overnight. But as it closes, it says, the Assyrians exiled them, gave some towns. It says, where they remain until this day. Now, obviously, it's till the day that's written.
The time of the writing.
Right.
Yeah.
But, man, that was a long-term problem for some short-term for some short-term joy or whatever. What are some bad choices that we make that have long-term decisions?
So there's a lot of them. I mean, I for whatever reason, I tend to go to financial issues first. But you can make a poor choice or decision financially, in a moment that will last the rest of your life or even generationally. Relationships, to make a choice and decision that I'm going to be involved in that relationship can have generational impacts. Spiritually, to choose not to follow God or to fall away from God, can have long-term impacts, and there, I would say pretty much any area of our life is that way.
Sure.
Well, finances was one of the first things that came to my mind, because I've known adult people who got left paying the debts of their parents off when they passed away because it just got deferred to them. And they didn't necessarily have anything to do with it, but it then became their job.
Yeah, sometimes the decisions are good and sometimes they're bad. And even sometimes what appears to be a bad decision may be the right decision. And I'll give you a couple instances. When you marry, who you marry, where you choose to live, and who you have close to you. You can move away and improve your finances, but isolate your family.
Yeah.
And your family's devastated, but you got money. So the one choice long-term financially was the right choice, but for your family it was the wrong choice because you isolated yourself. And on the opposite side of that, I was just thinking, because I was recently, somebody was asking me some questions about my dad, and my dad went to NC State, pulp and paper engineer degree, came to Weyerhaeuser in Plymouth, which is not far from where we are, and took a job. And roughly after about a year, 18 months, I would guess, he left there and took his first church and never worked in the pulp and paper field again. He pastored for over 20 years before he made what he did
there
when he left Weyerhaeuser.
Yeah, when he had just started there.
And having moved up here in this part of the world and seen people who had lesser jobs than he had, and seen them retire wealthy and have plenty of money, I think how his life financially would have been different had he chosen to stay. But I think about how my life would have been different had he chosen to stay.
Yeah.
And I think I would have been in church, but it would have looked different. I probably am not exposed to the ministry and may not even want to be in the ministry, so I think if you ask him, he would tell you 100-fold, I'd never go back and redo it. I did the right thing. So sometimes what looks like a bad choice is the right choice, but you don't always get to know how it's going to play out until you've played it out. Right. You don't always know how it's going to happen. Okay, any other thoughts or comments on this passage? If not, Jake, do you mind closing us in prayer?
Lord, we thank you for the truth and the simplicity of your word that points out many life lessons, and one that we have explored today is the fact that for every choice and every decision we make, there's a consequence, and often those consequences are generational. Help us to pursue you with everything that we have, and when we make choices and decisions, may they not be based on our feelings or our emotions at the time, but may we seek you, and may we do the right thing even when it's difficult or it's uncomfortable, realizing, one, that it honors you, and two, that it has an impact for all those who are coming behind us that we have influence with and over. All these things we ask in Jesus' name.